a record of the delightful piece they're going to play this evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, 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 your attention.
Anglo. Can you repeat that one more time?
Ceadda.
Ceadda. Okay.
Yeah.
Would you care going into your name? I always like when I feel people, when they have an interesting name, they have a story behind it. What's yours for that?
Yeah, oh, sure. So, Ceadda, well, there's a couple layers to it. Ceadda is the old Anglo-Saxon form of Chad, and there's a Saint Chad venerated in the Anglican and Catholic churches who converted most of the Germanic pagans in Mercia, which is in the middle of England, coincidentally known as the Midlands. He's venerated very highly there. Most churches you go into, you can find icons of him or stained glass, and I believe the Anglican Cathedral of Lichfield was founded by him. Obviously used to be Catholic before that whole thing. So I thought it's a perfect way, because I'm from the area of Mercia, to LARP medievally, call myself Chad without everyone realising it. I think that's just the gist of it, and of course he's a saint, so I thought that's too good of an opportunity to pass up. Nobody's capitalised on calling themselves Chad in the Anglo-Saxon language, so I thought I had to do it.
Is it really a LARP if you could trace your roots there, though? You said you are from Mercia, correct?
Yeah, but the Kingdom of Mercia hasn't existed for a long time. I'm trying to remember, all the kingdoms of England were united by Athelstan, which is another strong Anglo-Saxon name, before the Normans, but over 1,000 years ago now.
Yeah, how much of, I guess, England history, or that, how as we say in America, across the pond history, do you know of, would you say, a decent amount?
Definitely in the middle of, like, going from where I was a few years ago of, I know everything there is to know, I know about the effect that the world wars had on this country, to now knowing that there's so much that I don't know. I really do love trying to learn about Anglo-Saxon history, but given it's called erroneously the Dark Ages, there isn't actually that much we have in terms of primary sources, so people try and put things together. I'm really, really enjoying learning about High Middle Ages, from the times of around the 100 Years' War up to the Tudors. So you're talking about 12th to 15th century, 15th, 16th. That's where I'm actually thinking, okay, I actually have a grasp on the history of this country, which is just so dense. Obviously, this is before America even existed, and it's just hundreds of years of trying to know all of the kings, all of the members of the court, all of the rebellions, all of the foreign wars. It's pretty tough to keep up with, but it was all Catholic at that point, and I think that is what makes it's a yearning for that, which drives a lot of my research into that period.
Yeah, from the most of my knowledge, I know it goes from Roman Britannia, which was Julius Caesar invading the island in 55 BC around. And then you have the end of the Roman rule, of course, which is like 5th century AD. And that's when the island was kind of like, marks the beginning period of the Anglo-Saxon, if you will, like the Celtic immigrants and the fragments of Britannia into like various different Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. And then you go into like the medieval period where you have like Wessex, Mercia, and apologize for my pronunciation. Is it Northumbria, I believe?
I would say Northumbria, but I don't know if maybe more emphasis on the U is more historically accurate. I'm not sure.
Yeah, correct. But right now, I'm currently at the point of like Norman conquest, like 1066. So that's around the era of like King Canute and stuff like that. But it's definitely been fascinating reading into, because there's him, then there's William the Conqueror, who's basically just rode through there and is like, all right, we're establishing this rule in England. And a lot of people like cite that as being like the big push, I guess, for like civilization, if you will, or the rebirth of civilization in like what is today England, if you will.
In
But-
many ways, yes, but I would say not entirely. The Normans were most famous for their architecture in a lasting sense, but well, I shouldn't say that. Most famous for their architecture and their political system, which was much more rigid serfdom, whereas the Anglo-Saxons were very decentralized in their law. And well, the Normans were just coming from France, which at this time was very wealthy. Had a fantastic knowledge of architecture and public works, and there are lots of buildings like Westminster Abbey, which is where all of the royal family get married in and have their funerals in and everything. That was originally Norman. I've wrote about on my Substack a town called Arundel, has a fantastic Norman history. It was built by, I think it was William the Conqueror or maybe one of his sons, and was also the staging point for the rebellion that I don't know much about, but it involved a female descendant of William who had a genuine claim to the throne, but then her brother or cousin or someone or a man fought against it. I think he won in the end, but her base of operations was Arundel in the south, and it's amazing place with some amazing history. The Normans really did change the landscape of England in terms of where power was. It was very much more of like a patronage system where your power depends on how much the king likes you, and how much is very much became a scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing, which would later evolve into barons competing with the king, which was actually more akin to the way it tended to work in the Anglo-Saxon period. So the Normans were much more centralized and almost tyrannical, which sort of faded over time and wasn't quite the case just before they arrived.
Okay. And later, the formation of the UK, that's way down the road, correct, you'd say? Because
I think you could say that happened at the Battle of Culloden, which was the end of the Jacobite Rebellion. That was around about the time of the American Revolutionary War, if I'm not wrong. That was when England became the head of power in the whole United Kingdom, which united Wales and Scotland, I think.
Yeah, and do you know anything about, I believe it's in 1800s, early 1800s, the Kingdom of Ireland? They joined to create United Kingdom, if you will, of Great Britain and Ireland. Because I know at that point there was England, Scotland, Wales, that was still divided, or I wouldn't say divided, more gradually coalesced, if you will. They're different main nations, but there was that call to be we are the UK, if you will.
I honestly don't know much at all about the history of Ireland. I should do. I think it seems very, very complicated to try and get into if you're not in the cultural context of it. I think I'd imagine for the same reason, trying to learn about English history without being able to go to these places and see the effects that they had and the battles fought at these places and treaties signed and everything. If even though Irish and English culture is very similar, no matter how much we try and fight each other over it and say that it's not. There's enough of a cultural disconnect for me where I really just don't know. I have no idea what's gone on throughout most of the history of Ireland.
Yeah, fair enough. Sorry about that. I'm getting most of my history from American perspective, so I'm getting bits and pieces. But I do like reading into it, so I'm trying to say, okay, what about this and this part? But definitely, that's something I've always loved since I was a little kid, is learning about history. And thankfully, because of social media, I was able to meet a lot of great people from Europe. In fact, one of my best friends, he has a PhD in history and he's from Scotland, but he preferably does European history. So he could tell you any random niche fact at a drop of the hat about a kingdom or something like that. But very intelligent man. Yeah, he's a really great guy. But it's funny because I asked him what's in Scotland. He said nothing but sheep and castles. And I'm like, oh, really? And then he was like, yeah, sheep outnumber the people that live here. I'm like, wow, I thought he was joking. Then I looked it up and that was true. I'm like, wait, they have more sheep than people.
Wow. I didn't know that. I expect that for Wales. I didn't know it was the case for Scotland.
Yeah, I may have them. What's it? Yeah, Scotland's the castle ones, correct? I'm hoping I don't got them flipped.
There are a lot of castles in Scotland. A lot of them still in use as well.
Oh, nice. If you're okay me asking, well, first of all, I guess I never really said this to you publicly yet, but I just want to let you know, I have to tip my hat off for you for getting me involved and like, being interested in the politics. And it's definitely oh yeah, it was definitely your account that I'd say got me into it for like the starting point, if you will, and like get the ball moving. But hats off to you, man. Like, thank you for that. Like, and there's a lot of other people with similar stories to know. And I remember telling a couple of my group chats, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna have you on, and then they're all ecstatic. They're like, no way, you're gonna have him on. I'm like, yeah, and they're all like, tell him I said hi, and I'm like, all right, bet. So,
well, okay, well, yeah, I think that's a good segue to actually introduce myself, because most people have no idea who Ceadda is, but some of your audience might know Anglo-Libertarian. In fact, they probably, if they did know me, would have recognized my voice by now. Had you heard of me back in my Instagram days before YouTube?
No, my first videos was definitely your breakdown videos on the big three for like right-wing libertarianism. That's when I first learned about it, because before, my view of libertarianism was very, I hate to say this, I was young and into politics, was like something to be paired. So like how Steven Crowder would call himself, oh, I'm a conservative libertarian, or people like mix it, and I didn't really feel like libertarian. It's kind of like a at game, if you will, where it's like I'm just taking bits and pieces of this. But you were definitely the guy to like introduce me to a lot of that stuff and open a framework for like, hey, here are these people who are like philosophers, economists, and has like greater thoughts on the concept.
Brilliant. I'm very glad to know that. And some people can get quite angry at me, who I used to talk to a lot in those circles, but I certainly am a libertarian. That never stopped. I think a lot of these people think, I agree very much with Hans Hermann Hoppe on nearly everything, and I think a lot of people think that he just wrote Democracy, the God That Failed, and then that was it. The guy is still active up to, not so much today, but a few years ago, writing things about how libertarians should ally themselves with the alt-right, as it used to be called, rather than just digging yourself into a hole and creating a bubble that purity spirals and doesn't actually deal with the world as it is, and gets very lost in terms of strategy, because they don't actually know what politics is and how they should be navigating it. But I don't know how much you might want to get into that over the course of this discussion, but
I'd love to get into that, because I'm having similar issues as well. But
really?
Sorry, what were we?
No, I was just going to say I am a libertarian. I'm not an anarchist, and I wrote an article as to why. That is not to say that I don't agree with the non-aggression principle, or that I don't agree that if collective rule is to occur, it should be with the consent of the governed. But to call it anarchist is to say that there is no hierarchy. But I certainly do believe, as a right-winger as well as a libertarian, that hierarchy is fundamental to human societies. You cannot get rid of it, and someone will always be calling the shots while everyone else follows. That is just basic human anthropology. And a lot of people say that, okay, if you do disagree with the idea of a state by force, then you're an anarchist. And I would say, I don't agree with that. But if they think I'm an anarchist and they're an anarchist, and they understand that we are actually allies, then so be it, by the by.
Yeah, I'm having a similar situation too, where my political journey has been a bit of like a wash, where it's everywhere. Where first I went, before I found you online, I was still young, and I was very much into like, Ben Shapiro, facts, logic, all that stuff like that. And then when that stuff happened in real life, where I was like confronted with these people, I realized they didn't care about that. And it's kind of like the meme you're seeing online now, where it shows the conservative who's like beaten to a bloody pulp, and he's like mumbling, imagine if the situations were reversed.
Yeah, we're all Americans.
Yeah, we're not.
Yeah. That's something that I think is just noticing that can push someone more right-wing, whether or not they consider themselves conservatives or not in the first place. I've shielded it quite a lot, but an amazing book to read to understand power and the way it works is The Populist Delusion by Nima Parvini. It's very short. I think it's about 150 to 200 pages. And it will just help you to understand the people on the left who are going about this societal crusade do not care about being hypocrites. They do not care about anything except for the fact that you're their enemy in the way of progress as they see it, and they are just going to walk all over you. And if you try and give them the benefit of the doubt and try and make this very unbalanced, unfair playing field fair and balanced, you're just going to die.
Agreed. And I've actually read Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, and that was a book that kind of convinced me, because I went from paleo libertarian to like anarchist, and then I realized like anarchism, like you said, hierarchy is just natural to exist. Like you can't deny this, even seeing in like nature, if you will. But I don't know. It's recently I'm having a bit of an issue. I think I'm falling in the same place you are, where I'm getting a lot more into my faith, and I'm glad to be embraced by the church. And I traditionally have combined. I've always seen libertarianism as this. Libertarianism is a legal framework. They never claim to be a moral framework. So libertarianism to me answers the question, can you do this? While ethics answers the question, should you do this, basically. And I've always had the church for me answer the should you question. So like libertarianism, can you own as much property as you're capable of or you want to? Sure, why not? While like, Catholicism is like, sure, you can, but be wary of greed and fall into that trap, basically, where you're just basically hoarding all the things and not giving back. So I've always balanced that, but recently people have been accusing me of being, quote unquote, not a real libertarian. Because who's that guy running in Argentina right now?
Javier Milei, I think his last name's pronounced.
Yes, correct. He posted something saying, I'm going to say, he's like, the Catholic Church is corrupt, the Pope's a communist and all this stuff, slandering the church. And I simply said like, hey, I'm not going to really go against this guy, but I'm withdrawing my support for him. If he wins, he wins. If he doesn't, he doesn't. And that lit a fire under like, right-wing libertarian communities where they're always accusing me. And they're being like, are you saying you're putting the church above politics? I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And for a lot of them, it's like, it's so foreign to a concept because people you meet, a lot of these guys are like atheist or agnostic, which has always confused me because I'm like, where do you lay your justification of morality upon then if it's simply just on, the rights of this or that? But it was similar to that. Sorry, what were you saying?
I was just going to say, to give Javier the benefit of the doubt, I don't think he said anything about the church. I think he just said the Pope is a communist and like the most evil person on the planet, which you can't really defend that. But I'm not sure, because Chile is like 95% Catholic or something fantastic like that. I'm going to assume he either is at least considers himself loosely Catholic or was raised to a Catholic to at least an extent. I don't know. I think that will just make him maybe have respect for the church, but have no respect for the Pope, because Javier is mental, and we often quite need mental people at the minute to try and counter the crazy shit that is going on in the world. And I think in his mentalness, he just sees honestly quite a left-wing Pope, and sort of just goes all out on him. Which I think it's a big shame that Francis getting as involved in politics as he does can create that. I mean, this isn't a new thing. John Paul II was very much into politics and being against communism. I'm not sure that set a great precedent, because then when you get quite a left-wing president, dear, that's heretical. Pope, I think it sort of sets it up to pendulum back and forth between any pope's particular political leanings can make people view the church differently, which it should absolutely not. The church should not come across as a worldly institution. And I don't entirely lay blame at Javier's feet. I don't think he's some like crazy Satanist. I think he has unfortunately viewed the state of the church through a political lens, but they've made it very easy for him to do that. I'm trying to think what else I was going to follow up with that. What were we talking about? We talked about Javier and then other things.
We're talking about Javier, and now, like we said earlier, the, I guess, accusations of people like me and you being not real libertarians because we put faith above all else.
Yeah, I've actually thought so. Reading a lot about Tudor history lately, a massive accusation that was made against Catholics by the new Protestant English was you put Rome above England. And I think if someone said that to me as I was walking onto the flaming pyre, I would just say yes, of course. Of course, religion comes above politics. But to imagine that the Catholic religion is incompatible with libertarianism is to say Tom Woods and Lou Rockwell are fake libertarians, as well as there are rumours at least that Murray Rothbard was going to convert before not long before he died, but sadly didn't. And I think that's probably true because the man did have a great respect for the scholastic tradition. You can see that in lots of his writings about economic history. And he tried to frame his natural law in a Thomistic way. I don't think he did a very good job because I think he built it on too many unsubstantiated assumptions. But essentially, yes, I think you got it absolutely spot on. I think I phrased it in exactly the same way. Libertarianism is a legal theory. It does not make any sort of claim on morals. And so what you can do and what you should do are very different things. And I think you're right. So many people who won't acknowledge that libertarianism is only a legal system think that they don't have any sort of moral assumptions, but ask them if a person should engage in same-sex intercourse, and they'll say, absolutely, of course. There's nothing libertarian that says you can't, and completely miss the question, I think. Anyone who does, their head. Well, I mean, yeah, of course. Like, I go further than that to say that people like that are completely politically inept and toothless. They actually don't threaten the status quo at all. Because you can walk into a HR department, which is the main method of enforcement of the regime's ideology in an economy like ours, and you can go in there and say, I think everyone should be allowed to own a gun. I think the government shouldn't exist. I think we shouldn't have to pay taxes. And I say, okay, can you go back to your desk, please, and just do some fucking work? Go in there and say, I don't think we should be hiring homosexual employees. Oh, which one do you think is going to get more of a reaction? You could actually go, maybe not in America, but here you will go to court for that. It'll probably, hopefully, you'll get away with it in terms of you won't go to prison because of a very loose religious freedom protection we have, but you will lose your job and your name will be everywhere and you will be turned into a pariah. You will not do that if you say anything in regards to libertarian legal theory. So the actual status quo, the people who enforce it have made the battle lines very clear. And if you aren't going anywhere near those lines, you're not fighting. You're just pretending to stand on some sort of podium and cheering yourself along while everyone else is just playing a completely different game.
Agreed. And like what you were saying earlier about how like of these movements that they don't care about hypocrisy, they don't care about, contradictions, they're like eating through. Are you familiar with Warhammer 40k by any chance?
Yeah, I've never played it. I've played lots of the RTS games. Dawn of War is one of my favorite games of all time. I don't know that much about the lore, but I'm at least vaguely familiar.
Are you familiar with the Tyranids?
Yes.
I was like, it's just an unending wave and horde, just not caring, just like destroying, going through. It's similar like that, where it's like a piranha pit, if you will, where the moment you're swimming amongst the piranhas and you have like a light cut on you, they smell blood and go for it. And that's why I feel like people like, yourself and I and others, especially if you're not careful with who you're around, if you get cut and bleed, you're going to get eaten, basically. And that's what I'm worried about a lot today, especially because, I'm starting to see an uprising like young Catholics, especially like the Thomists, putting their voices heard. But at the same time, it's always the same where, like you said, it's like status, like trying to shove that down. And although I agree in America is a lot more easier compared to Europe, I think both sides could be pretty difficult in the sense of, like you said, isolation, outcasting, basically this person's like the sheep, the black sheep. But it did birth the phenomenon of anons, though. I do like that, I'd say.
Yeah, Yeah, we anonymous troll demons, according to Jordan Peterson. But what? I completely forgot where I was going to go. I had to get the Jordan Peterson joke in there. That threw me off.
I love the Jordan Peterson joke.
That was it. No, I got it. Yeah, I do like questioning whether Jordan Peterson was ever actually any good, but that's by the by. I've done it again. I've forgotten. Oh my god, I'm getting so old. What is wrong with me?
No, you're not old just yet.
I like annoying everyone at my job by saying, "Oh, I'm really getting on now. I'm 27 years old, and they just want to punch me."
Yeah, I'm prior service, so my body's just broken, and
yeah,
I do think I'm like, job. Yeah, I joke around. I'm like, I may be 22, but my body feels 42. Okay, give me a minute.
Yeah. I bet you go whenever you get out of a chair.
Yeah, the universal. Let's go. What are you saying though? Sorry.
I'm terrible. I keep forgetting. I think, yes, that was it. I was going to say another. I don't like to just make any conversation about politics ragging on libertarians because, like I said, I am a libertarian. But where a vast majority of libertarians have a total misunderstanding of politics is the difference between hard and soft power, and I think they can only ever view tyranny through a lens of Stalin. And unless the KGB is going around shooting people and then throwing their wives and children in a gulag, then the government's not actually doing anything to impose their will on me, which is utter nonsense. I think there are greater protections of hard power in the US where you won't go to prison for speaking out against the status quo anywhere near as easily as you will in the UK, but it is just as easy for you to be completely disenfranchised and have your life ruined. And that, if we've known about this forever, everyone's called it cancel culture for the longest time, but I think libertarians don't understand cancel culture for a couple of reasons. One, cancel culture is a good thing. It's what you're getting cancelled for that's currently terrible. And two, that is an exercise of power, with power, the definition of power being the ability to influence people. Everyone is following the incentives set by the state and their court jesters in the private sector to toe the line. And just because a literal gun is not against your head does not mean that they will impose sanctions upon you which will destroy you economically, physically, just the same way as if they were to go into your house, take all of your shit, and beat the crap out of you. There absolutely is a will that they want enforced, and it is not the Second Amendment is not the line in the sand. They've completely just skirted around that, and the guns that everyone has have done nothing to protect it. It requires a much greater, I don't think they understand the fight they're up against. It is against the established institutions of the most powerful country the world has ever seen. They need to be completely destroyed, and you aren't going to do that by purity spiraling everyone into only one particular mindset and one course of action that doesn't actually fight on the front lines of the established war. And I think that's just why it leaves them just sort of being politically embarrassed all the time. The only person who is doing it right is Javier Milei, who his hatred for leftism takes him to the point of basically foaming at the mouth in any interview he does. And if he gets into power, I really hope his general insanity, which in this case is a good thing, the guy is insane, but I hope that means he'll actually do what needs to be done. If you aren't using at least the Javier Milei strategy of going to the seat of power and overthrowing it, or at least I would say you could subvert these institutions, but the leftists are so good at subversion and countering it that it's kind of pointless. Just be the strong man and use the strength for good. To imagine that power itself is bad is a ridiculous liberal assumption, which is one, not only true, but two, can never possibly be changed. Power is always going to exist, and quite simply, if good people aren't trying to occupy that place of power, bad people will. So that's my rant about power for the moment.
No, and I agree with that because especially like we were talking at the beginning of this podcast about, the history of England up to the point we are today. And you see throughout it too, there's feudal systems and power and people ruling and trading and doing a lot of, I'd argue, beneficiary things for that landmass, like helping others, building kingdoms, building established, road societies. And you have this like weird, like you said, post-enlightenment, if you will, birth of like, liberalism, all power bad, separation church state. And it's kind of like almost that's people's default now, if that makes any sense. Like I've had 2 guests on my podcast before, and both of them were pretty big on like the global liberalism scale stuff. And then he went on the rant saying like, we just need to spread more democracy and liberalism for the whole world, and everything would just get better. And then I gave him a little bit of pushback, like, well, what about people who've been living a certain ways for thousands, if hundreds, if not thousands of years, and you're introducing this brand new system to them? And then he bewilderedly just was like, I don't think that's ever happened. I'm like, have you looked at the Middle East recently? But
no, that's good. I have a passionate hatred for democracy, but I also do have to acknowledge that the underlying virtue of a society is way more important than the political form that it takes. It's much more about I'm trying to think in terms of Aristotelian causation, not the form, but almost a teleology, but sort of like what is your political system working towards is way more important than what is your political system, even though I think democracy by itself is the most rapidly degenerating of all systems and spirals the most out of control. To imagine as well that democracy decentralizes power is just utterly insane, when the US government is the most centralized political institution that has ever existed. Medieval kingdoms were really very decentralized. The king did not have absolute power. He only had control over a small part of the landmass of the nation, which was the royal estate, and he relied on the cooperation of the barons, who were trying to mutually cooperate with the king, both of them for their own self-interests. And so you did have a hierarchy of devolved powers where the king needs the nobles need the peasants, and that goes all the way up as well. Peasants need the nobles need the king, and everyone actually seeks to benefit each other. And when, of course, you have a very, very devout Catholic society underneath that, the result's going to be fantastic. And then when you simply have one handful of people in charge who might only have 4 or 5 years to pursue their own interests, and completely get rid of any sort of moral foundation of society, you end up with exactly what we have now. And I always want to ask a lot of libertarians with these Enlightenment and not even classically liberal, just liberal with a capital L assumptions, if Enlightenment liberalism is so good and we followed it completely by the book for 200 years and it's gotten us here, like how do you explain that? How do you explain that the foundations are good and the result is the worst political system humanity has ever seen by their own measurements? It's always a good question.
No, 100% agree with you. And usually they try to spiral into like, well, that wasn't real X, but that just goes down the no true Scotsman fallacy of saying like, hey, if you're just trying to like promote this ideal of being like, oh yeah, that wasn't real X ideology, then you're just running down a slippery slope to, okay, what is then? And funny enough, I got in a debate with a communist before where anytime I brought up an example, they keep bumping in and saying like, oh, that wasn't real communism, Mm-hmm. And of course, I was like, okay, I want to hear what's your definition of communism. And it's, of course, moneyless, classless, stateless society that's like so pure, sublime, and utopian. That's impossible to work in reality. But I'm like, okay, I'll play along with this. And then I let them speak, and they brought up an example of a capitalist country, and I cut them off and said that wasn't real capitalism. And then they look so shocked. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, you heard me. It wasn't real capitalism. And then I began to read the most right libertarian definition of like anarcho-capitalism imaginable, just to mess with them, be like, yeah, you see, so. And then they're like, no, it's not fair. You can't do that because then nothing's capitalism. And then just the irony of me sitting there watching them mouth that to me while not realizing they did the same thing. And I simply said to them, okay, we have two alternatives now. One, we both admit our systems are what they are, and we go forward from here. Or two, we're stuck in this infinite loop of me and you both going back saying that's not real X. So which one would you prefer to do? But
yeah, I think it's slightly different in that they can say communism has never been tried, whereas I think with libertarians, at least they can point to examples where it was at least close to being tried. And obviously the very beginning of America is a good example of that. I do think a better example is early Victorian England, that they generally had much more classically liberal principles than the early Americans did. But the thing with a classical liberal or a libertarian who looks back to that Enlightenment time and the ideas which came from there with those rose-tinted glasses and said, that's the way everything should have been. It's very different looking at what people say their objectives are and what their assumptions are underneath that, which motivate them. And you'll find for the American founders and a lot of the founders of just liberal ideology, the motivation, way more than freedom, is equality. And when that is the case, how could you ever expect these ideas, which they want freedom and they want equality, and whether that's equality before the law, which actually is a good thing, if you just simply have equality as the assumption that you're building a political system under, it's going to go left. As I think not almost value-free, but we could say at least a very fair definition of left and right is that on the left they pursue equality, on the right they pursue order. And you can at least know, if you're a libertarian, I think, that you're not a leftist. So what do you think about order? Because a lot of them wouldn't think about it in terms of... They wouldn't think about it in terms of that. They think, well, right-wing is just like nationalism or something. Anyone who, in their right mind, who is a libertarian, would say out of choosing between equality and order, they should be pursuing order. And that makes them right-wing. And then that should mean they should question the assumptions of the Enlightenment, which created leftism as we know it. Socialism did not exist in any sort of respect. There was no progenitor of socialism and communism before liberalism, and it came out of liberalism. And I think if you're going to be a libertarian, you have to ask yourselves those questions, and you have to say, what side of the fence do I sit on, left or right? And that will really, really change your perspective of the assumptions of your ideology, which will then tell you where it will go if it is successful.
Agreed. What would you tell, I guess, libertarians today who are a bit confused or don't know if they're post-Enlightenment or pre-Enlightenment? Like, what would general advice be for that? Would it be what you said earlier, the order compared to equality, or?
Yes, I would say read a lot of Hans Hermann Hoppe's more recent stuff, because like I said, he didn't write one book and then stop. Everything he's written since then is a continuation from that, because you can clearly tell reading that book, out of equality or order, this man's going to choose order. And so why would you not want to know his expansion on those ideas and where he's gone since then in his research down that path, which he did such an amazing job of outlining why that's the path you should go down in that book. Why would you not be curious to want to know more? But because we have to, I think the best thing that can happen to a libertarian, and I know this from my experience, and it sounds like yours as well, is to not just think of everything in terms of politics, or at least especially legal theory, which is all libertarianism is, that then influences your politics. Philosophy as a whole should absolutely be grappled by anyone who's intellectually curious enough to even call themselves a libertarian. I think the only people that can do that are people who are curious about the way the world works, and more so the way the world should work rather than it currently does. And I think if that shows enough of a spark of curiosity to want to go out and to learn more about reality, more beyond just how do humans organize themselves, which is what politics and economics is, which isn't really that interesting. after a certain point. You really should pick up history and philosophy if you're intellectually curious and ask yourself, why did people believe the things that they did for thousands of years and then we stopped believing 5 minutes ago? Were they wrong for all of that time? Were they just backward savages that were barely human, or have we got it wrong? And that was what sent me down the path of just saying, no, you know what? We live in the most insane time in human history, where we are the most backwards from the assumptions which have carried humanity to where we are today. We've literally done a 180 turn from them and are trying to move away from beauty, goodness, and truth. And you can see that all around us, where morals, if you even mention the word morals, you are someone to be cast out because you're infringing on the freedom of others, which is because liberalism got us here. Or if you say to someone, no, I don't think you should be going out and catching venereal diseases, you are infringing on their freedom to do so just by saying it. And especially, of course, religion is the most important thing. And ask yourself why the greatest minds that humanity has ever seen either were religious and especially Catholic, or at least inspired them, like Aristotle and Plato. They are fundamental to a view of reality and existence which is sane, which actually makes sense of the universe around us and what we are supposed to do in it and why we are even in it. These are things that the science cannot answer. They base I don't know. I think the ramble got a bit on too many tangents right there. But a complete value-free analysis, which is what you do in economics, can only tell you so much out of reality. And if you view everything through that, one, you're not even going to see your own assumptions. Because like we said, so many atheist or agnostic libertarians will say, I have no moral assumptions, I don't know anything about morals, or maybe all morality is subjective. If you give a traditionally moral opinion, they will quickly turn against you. And I can't stand when someone who is intellectually curious doesn't have the curiosity to then question their own assumptions about things wider than just politics. It's quite sad, because politics and economics are just things of the dirt. They are just so materialistic, and they tell you so little about reality and any sort of place we could possibly have in the order of things around us. There's simply so much more to life and reality than politics and economics, and everyone should explore beyond those boundaries that have been set up.
No, I love that too, because it reminds me of like when I had an individual, I'm not going to say her name, and a predominantly pretty big right-wing libertarian group chat, like try to get a reaction on me being like, oh, I don't believe in a god, what do you think about me? I'm like, good for you, man. Just hope you know materialism ain't going to you after you die. Like, you're not taking all this wealth and property with you to the grave, to the sense, or it's coming to you in the afterlife. But a question I wanted to bounce off from that, you're bringing up philosophy. I've always had the opinion of the only thing I know is I know nothing at all. And that has definitely been helping me a lot in learning and expanding more things, or I try to humble myself to like read up into things where I can understand it better. Because that's two good things I get out of that. One, I either have a different ideology I understand where I don't agree with, sharpen my own, or two, I change things up in my own ideology or world frame and view, and then move forward from there. So it's always a good. But I was asking this question considering objective moral truth and objective moral reality to some anarchist friends, and I asked them, so we see in today people derive their objective morality through many different things. If you have someone who's very pro-state, or statist, they would subscribe their objective moral truth to, this is what the state is, this is what is good. If you have someone like, let's say, a constitutionalist, they care about what's written on a piece of paper, so they'll holler up and down, holding the amendments, being like, this is truth, this is what is good. And then I thought that was interesting. So even for us Catholics, what is our moral truth? Our moral truth is Christ. We get our truth through that. And when I was trying to ask, my anarchist friends, I'm like, so you are an anarchist and an atheist. You, one, have removed religion, so you have no moral truth from above, okay? Two, you remove the state, so you have no moral objective truth from there. That only leaves you, also no constitution, none of that. that leaves you with like one thing left, and it's the self. And it just kind of made me ask the question: is it really a moral truth if it's purely only reflective of yourself? Because you get a room of 10 people, you tell me what is the objective truth, and all of them would give you 10 different answers. And it's like, what's the point then? Is it really objective if everyone has a different thing? But yeah, what's your opinion on all of that, I guess?
I think that's a great way of breaking it down, and I haven't thought about it in that sense. I think it is very good to try and show people where they themselves are the end of the line, because I think you can build on that fantastically from a Christian point of saying that living for yourself is death. But more so, I often, it is true that morality and truth come from God, because God is truth, he is reality, he is pure existence. But I always try to not frame it as like morality exists because God just wags his fingers sometimes, say, you shouldn't be doing that. Morality, it comes from our nature as humans. What ought we be doing? If we are a human, what ought we do? That is the basic moral question. And that ultimately it goes back to God, because our nature comes from God. He is the efficient cause of our being, which means ultimately, yes, he does decide what it is that we should or shouldn't do, but that is a very different thing than, it's immoral because God said so. It's immoral if we do something which goes against our very nature, which shows that that doesn't just make God cry because like he doesn't need us. God is affected by immorality and sin, but it's not like we actually harm him when we sin. We harm ourselves simply because we are doing something inhuman. Anytime we sin, we are acting in a way contrary to our own nature, and we are the primary victim of that. And that helps people sometimes, of course, when they are quite selfish. Which, if you're not religious, you are going to be naturally selfish, no matter how much anyone tries to deny it. A slight tangent is, I do think there can be atheists who believe in objective morality. The objective morality they believe in will be incorrect, but I think the only people who properly qualify are objectivists. One, because they come from an Aristotelian tradition, even though they disregard teleology, but they do have a sense that to be moral is to behave like a human, and they say, humans are rational, so any behavior which is rational in a qualified sense is moral behavior, and that's quite true. But without God, they do have the self as the ultimate good, and they will happily and proudly say that. They're not afraid of saying that because it is logically consistent. I think the only morally, logically consistent atheists are objectivists. Now, people like that, you're not going to convince by trying to say, you as yourself are the arbiter of morality. They'll say, well, no, I'm not, but I am the ultimate good, and my morality should be striving towards improving myself and making myself better off. So, I don't know if that was too rambly, if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I like that. It made me think about that. So, you're speaking on objectivism, I noticed too. A lot of people like Kant. Do you have any strong opinions on Kant?
I would like to say I do. Frankly, I don't know enough about him to have too strong of an opinion. I don't want to overstate my case, but the impression I get is that everything follows from his epistemology, which is fundamentally skeptical, and so I think that then sort of outlines everything that comes from him. To say that we cannot perceive things as they are, only our perception of them, drives a wedge between the human mind and reality, and that could only possibly create subjectivism and skepticism, which I don't really. This is the part I don't understand. He wasn't the first person to come up with this sort of thing. It was Descartes with his dualism first. And then a lot of Hume in there as well, with obviously it's Hume's guillotine. I'm trying to think of what the actual name for it is, but that our observation of something cannot tell us anything innate about its nature. It can only tell us about something it's currently doing, not that it ought to do it or it is designed to do it or anything like that. It's part of, I think, a long line of skepticism which came out of the Enlightenment, which could only possibly end in, well, I'd like to say postmodernism. I think postmodernism is the end of the line for subjectivism, where nothing could possibly known to be true, which of course is a self-refuting statement because you're claiming that that claim is true. And I think that just shows the absurdity of it. So it kind of goes round in circles, I think. I think Kant is one of the progenitors of where we are today. And I like saying that because so many people, if you just say the reason where we are today is this person, they'll know that's bad, because pretty much everyone knows that where we are societally today is bad.
No, agree. And like you said earlier, it made me actually think a lot, saying how like today's society, this world we live in, is completely 180'd. So we shouldn't be delusional to be like, oh, everyone before us was wrong and we somehow got it right.
Yep.
And I just think I've always thought it silly when people like the progressive, if you will, who's like saying, no, we need more progress, we need more change. And if you just ask them the question like, why though? Like, why do we need this? So and it just stumps them because it's such a simplistic question, but it stings because it's like, what's the necessary reason for us? Like, you know, we have food on our table, we're able to like keep the lights on, we're able to like have a community, all these things like that. Why are you pushing so hard to change all this stuff? And it's to the extent where it's just like almost changed simply for the fact to change itself, where there's no needing outside of that. It's just like boredom to me is what I see. And I feel like that's why you see a lot of the birth of these new ideologies or new appeal to like communism or socialism today. Is because you have a lot of young teenagers and adults who are living in their suburbs, bored out of their mind, not knowing what to do. And then they think they discovered the answer to the world by picking up a book by Hegel or Marx. Mm-hmm. And then they just march forward from there. And I'm like, but that's not really the whole extent. And I agree with what you said, branch out more. Like, look at what more that fascinates you besides economics, because you see too much this almost like Kafka trap where you'll have someone who devotes their entire life for ideology to nothing but that one theory. So I've met people who've read every single book under the sun for X ideology, but the moment you ask them, like you said earlier, morality question or something outside of their like wheelhouse, it's like they short circuit, error 404 type stuff. And I'm like, you could look at more besides just limited frame and scope you're setting for yourself, because no one's setting it for you. And that's something that always irritates me a bit.
And I think someone who does become like a savant in that one particular area, if it is something as, let's call it, lowly as politics and economics, because they're so far from transcendental, that kind of person, because they are an expert in that one field, is likely to be extremely close-minded. I think if you... I won't claim to be an expert on anything. I have a middling knowledge of quite a varied amount of things. Philosophy and economics are the two that I have the highest amount of knowledge in. And if someone came to me with a philosophical question I don't understand, I don't understand it. Someone who can become a savant in one area very quickly becomes a typical case of the Dunning-Kruger effect in every other area. I'd almost want to grab someone who's going down that road and sort of make them question their assumptions before they get to the end of the line of this one field, and they've read every single book from Mises, Hayek and Rothbard, and they think that they've figured everything out. Once they've reached that point, they'll likely become very, very stubborn and not actually want to address the many, many, many assumptions which influence every other area of their life. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's very easy to stump someone like that because, quite frankly, we don't have Renaissance men anymore. We don't have people who are experts in multiple fields, and it's part of what fuels the replication crisis in academia at the moment. And someone who's an expert in one field thinks they're qualified to speak on everything, which is just completely untrue.
It's like you see on Twitter where people would start their sentences with "as a professor."
Yeah.
And then it's just like, what do you mean by that? You think that's going to make me agree with you more? Like, but...
yeah, well, of course, COVID just couldn't have possibly epitomized that more. If anyone had a PhD in anything, then they were allowed to tell you that you deserve to die. It was just it was just insane.
Yeah. Rotating around a bit, I want to ask you this. For you personally, what got you started down this road, if you will, from like to start to where you are today? Like, what inspired the birth of Anglo-Libertarian, and later you have what we are today, where it's Ceadda of Mercia? Like, what was the transition for that moving forward? And do you have any plans or ideas to reactivate your channel, or maybe change the theme around, format it, put up some different videos? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, okay, I'll take it in order. So, did you mean the whole timeline of like going from not having a political opinion to where I am now?
Sure. If you're okay, we go down that one. I'd love to hear it.
Well, I mean, if you're asking a different question, then it's entirely up to you.
No, that was definitely around the question. I was asking like what got you, I guess, into politics that later led to you making Anglo-Libertarian to where we are today with Ceadda of Mercia.
Sure. Okay. Well, so I voted to leave in the Brexit vote, which was a pivotal point of British political history. The vote to leave the European Union, and I voted to leave, and I tried to articulate why. And I always laugh looking back on it now, because I said the European Parliament is unelected, and English institutions stand for freedom and democracy. Obviously, things took a different turn, but that sort of got me. I'd never had any political opinions before 2016. I must have been around about 19 years old, I think. Somewhere around that. Hold on. No. Oh, bloody hell. Yeah, I was just able to vote, actually. And I was trying to tell myself, okay, I did quite believe in that vote, but why? And that got me to sort of think, well, what do political parties stand for? What actually is the difference between Labour and the Conservatives in this country? And obviously, if I voted Leave, I was going to side with the Conservatives. So I was definitely not politically active at this point, but I became a very, very mild conservative. I'd never have conversations about it. I wouldn't really look into anything aside from the economics, because that's what started my interest in this. What actually started my interest in economics was, at the time of Brexit, left-wing newspapers were saying this is going to be the worst thing that has ever happened. The entire island is going to sink into the Atlantic Ocean. And then the right wing was saying this is absolutely fantastic. We are going to reinstate the empire and control the entire world because we're going to be so great and powerful thanks to all the wealth we're going to get from doing this. And I just thought, who the hell's right? No one's going to actually tell me what the truth of the matter is. I kind of have to figure it out myself. And that got me interested in economics. And then the person I latched onto when I got interested in that was Milton Friedman. Hearing his economic theories before I had done any real study of economics, I was like, this guy is just saying so many fantastic things I'd never even thought about before, but wow, he's correct. And that is what really started libertarianism. It was a gentle tiptoe out of normie, completely milquetoast conservatism without even being passionate about it, to economics, which led me to libertarianism. Very quickly from Milton Friedman did I learn about Murray Rothbard, and that then I had to learn the difference between the monetarist and Chicago school economics and Austrian school economics, but also minarchism and anarchism. And it just felt like that opened a massive box of things to explore. Like, there are so many labels here. What do they all mean? What do I agree with? And while I was still figuring this out, I made an Instagram meme page called Anglo-Libertarian, and that was the first incarnation of it. I remember some of I would always create my own memes and post about like one every other day or so. And I managed to, at some point, I think, get about 14,000 followers, which I always think I think it's quite funny. If anyone knows me, they'll always know me from my YouTube channel, but I actually got way more traction with these Instagram meme pages. So I made the first one, and I think this was around about the time of the 2020 US election. The whole Facebook group was going ham on censorship, and simply because I was saying both sides are bad, you shouldn't vote, the government sucks, and I wasn't even saying this in America. Like, I couldn't have even voted. My account got so like nuked. It wasn't just banned. My personal Facebook got banned, and I lost like all of my. I'll just carry on from there. So yeah, Facebook. The Facebook group and now Meta and everything like just completely wiped any trace of my accounts that they've ever had, and I can't make another Instagram page. I've managed to get around them and make a Facebook page just so I can message family. But yeah, they really hated me. It felt very targeted for something that was like I was not at that big of an account. Like yeah, I had 15,000 followers, but that was nothing. There were pages called just like Communism Forever that had like 200,000, but I got banned to the point where so much of my personal footprint on the internet was just wiped forever. So I couldn't make another Instagram page, which was all I'd known at that point, just making fucking memes and DMing people and making stories about political theory and economics. And so I thought, what else can I put this like effort to spread the message into? And I actually thought I've spotted a perfect niche in the market here. What libertarians are there on YouTube? Like none. There was a guy called That Guy T who seemed to have gone off on a weird route and stopped making videos years before I did. Even as it stands now, I don't think there's anyone that's like just a libertarian political YouTuber apart from Liquid Zulu, who I've talked to for a very long time.
He speaks very highly of you. He always tells me if it wasn't for you, he wouldn't have started anything.
That's lovely. Yeah, he said that to me a couple of times, and I very much appreciate that. I'm still happy to help and carry on, even if, like I say, that's not really sort of my leanings as much anymore. But that's a good way to plug it. If you want a libertarian YouTuber, your only hope is Liquid Zulu, and I think he mostly does debates, which would never been my thing, but a lot of people do find entertainment in those. So at that time,
yeah, I run a debate platform on the side
nice.
actually with this podcast, and he's in one of my tournaments right now, and so far he's been stomping people.
Yeah,
it's a bracket tournament. It's just a row 4, and he's been like stomp, moving up the ladder. I'm like, Jesus, he gotta stop 8 times soon.
No, he's got the perfect build for a debater because he's very intelligent and knowledgeable, but also like one of the most stubborn people I've ever met. So he's going to do well in that arena. So yes, I noticed. Okay, I'm a libertarian. I like making content on social media. What can I do now that I have no access to social media? Twitter doesn't really like it's got no sort of presence of the sort of thing that I wanted to do. I do love Twitter/X now and use it all the time, but at that point it was not what I wanted to do at all, and so it was just YouTube channel. At this point I was also on a podcast as well. Like I forget about that, called the E-Militia podcast, with Bloody Revolutions. He's like the guy that I think has got the most recognition coming out of it. And that was just a typical libertarian podcast. I had to quit because like we would start recording at my like 4 a.m. and go on for like 2 or 3 hours. So when I actually went to university to start studying economics, which is a very, very hard thing to study, I couldn't keep up with that anymore. So YouTube was the obvious next step. I'd done podcast content, so I had a good microphone set up, understood speaking in a very broad sense, and I knew I loved writing because at this time I was an economics student. I loved writing essays, and so I just wrote down scripts of like what I would do as like a short blog post if I was going to do that, and just make videos on them without even a real video element. Like I had like a bit of a moving background, but that was it. No subtitles, no face, no very, very, very little B-roll. And that's what I did for I think it was about 2 years maybe that I made videos under Anglo-Libertarian. I think my channel currently has about like 7,000 subscribers, so like it never popped off, but still I was the only person making this sort of libertarian political content, and there's again Zulu's the only one who comes close that's still around. It's a massive gap in the market that I'm constantly trying to influence people to try and take advantage of, like I did. But after,
No, I agree. And a lot of our opinion online, especially the people I talked to, you were the account that walked so the rest could run, if that makes any sense. And it's in a funny way because you are right. There wasn't anyone around besides you, and you were like pushing out stuff. So now we got people like Zulu and Praxben like putting out content. And other guys.
Yeah, great. And again, those Praxben loves his debates as well. I've always been much more about just essays rather than fighting. So I think it is still quite different. The people that have come after me, which is, again, it's only two. It's Praxben and Zulu. They still do things quite different to the way I did it. I hope they do have more success than I do, but I just it's not my sort of thing at all. What were you going to say?
I'd recommend checking out a guy called MRH Legacy.
Oh, yeah.
He does more
I know him as well.
essays, homage to you.
Yeah.
And then there's Mentis Wave has a similar thing as well. But definitely, like, all you guys, is my hats off to you because it's like going against a Leviathan, if you will. It's very impressive.
I mean, it's nothing but an uphill battle, especially if you want to get in this sort of like debate arena. When you start looking at just how unbelievably influential solo content creators are on the left. Of course, you have people like Vosh and Hassan and Destiny, who's just more of a liberal than a socialist. But like, they are absolutely rolling in money, and I am very grateful to the people who did donate to me when I made videos, and it helped me improve like audio setups and things like that. But if I were to try and make a living out of making that content, it would take years more work from today to be able to do it. And yet these leftists are being just completely bankrolled and given genuine places of influence in society. And if you want to try and make a libertarian YouTube channel, you've got no institutional support and you're trying to take a fight to them. It's a very, very daunting task. And I think that's kind of, I did get really burnt out doing it towards the end, because I always felt like each video I make needs to help further the objective of making the world a better place in a tangible way, and that is just way too heavy of a burden to have on your shoulders. And it was me that put that burden there. I don't want to like make it seem as if anyone was ever expecting such like massive feats other than myself. But after a while I just couldn't really do it, and then I made a couple of videos about becoming Christian, which was something I'd just never even considered before, and that has helped me to the point where I can actually find genuine peace through the sacrifice of Christ and how his victory over the world. Now I don't need to feel like I'm the one who needs to try and beat the world and fix it. That's been done for me. And I was coming up to the end of university, and I knew that I wasn't going to have any time to make videos because they're very time-consuming things, especially if you do a script as well, like I did. The only shortcut I made was not filming myself, but that doesn't take up too much time to edit that at all. So yeah, that was just kind of the end of the channel. I wanted to, because I was going to stop making videos, and I had a much broader mindset and things that I knew about with much more philosophy, because I've always liked philosophy, but way more of it, and now religion. Just felt like it's time to do a bit of a soft reboot, and so changed my name to Ceadda of Mercia. And at the moment I'm just taking it steady. I've got a Substack, which I very rarely write for. It's like every few months I'll have the time to put something to it, but most of my creative endeavor time is currently going towards planning a book. So that's on to the next stage. It's quite a long timeline, really, going back to 2016, and a lot of different things I've done in that time. Memes, podcast, then YouTube channel, and leaving people high and dry. I know there are lots of people who miss my content, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm sorry that I can't do it, but it's just it had its time, and now it's on to new things.
All good things come to an end. I respect that from you.
Nice.
Definitely agree with that. After this, send me your Substack stuff so I can publish it when we have this episode uploaded. But There's that. And your video, My Journey to Christianity, and Most Libertarians Don't Understand Philosophy, those two were probably my favorite videos because they got me a lot more in that. But
I'm really glad to hear that, because like all I've ever seen from those videos is negative comments, and I thought like what I'm saying is true. It needs to be said. It's good to say it. It's for the good of every listener that they hear this. So it wasn't like I don't look at that and go, oh, everyone hated me, because I don't really care if people reacted negatively to that. They needed to hear it, and it's the truth regardless. But yeah, I'm glad to hear someone actually got value out of it, because it just seemed to piss a lot of people off, which I expected.
No, it's funny. It reminds me of Galatians 4:16. They hated Jesus because he told them the truth. That's what it just reminds me. This is you sitting up here. It's like the libertarians hated him because he spoke the truth.
Yeah, well, I mean, I spoke a lot of truth based in Jesus, so it should come as no surprise that it was hated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But is there anything you want to add on to any other big projects in the future you have up planned, or like you said earlier, just taking it slow right now?
Getting married and starting a family. It's way.
Oh, congratulations!
Thank you. Way more time-consuming and important than making political content.
Of course, put family first. I tell that to all the people who are on my debate stage or on my podcast or scheduling. Always put your family first above all things. That's most important.
That's perfect. Yeah, like, I would like. I'm doing the book, but like my first answer should always be, in terms of like what is going to actually better my life and me as a person, bring me deeper into a relationship with God and the church, and that is vocations and sacraments. So there's marriage, there's family, and that will come a hell of a lot before this book. But that is like the only. It's not even really political. To give a brief explanation of this, have you read Bronze Age Mindset?
Oh yes, me and Bronze Age perverts are mutuals.
Oh,
he's an interesting fellow.
Oh,
yeah,
that's a badge of honor a little bit. So like
I'm in touch with a lot of big right wing accounts, but I don't know why. I'm not that important, but they like me.
Well, good job. So what I want to do is, Bronze Age Mindset has captured the minds of so many disenfranchised young men, and there is a lot of good and truth in that book. But ultimately, because of course it's not orientated towards God and Jesus and Catholicism, it's missing that's not just one inconsequential component it's missing. It's a very foundation of reality, goodness, beauty, and truth. The encompassment of that is absent from that book, and it makes itself very clear in where you and I would disagree with the things that Bap says in that book. It all comes down to that, and so I want to sort of that's my target audience, the same target audience as Bronze Age Mindset, but I want to show that the thirst for conquest, the thirst for greatness, the pursuit of life and vitality, and going out there and seizing the world, and all this youthful male ambition, which is so lost in society, and so many people want. The best embodiment you'll find in that is within the Catholic Church, and anyone who would turn their nose up at that seems to forget about the fact that the Templars existed. That's the sort of line I want to go down. I want to capture that audience of people who feel, especially young men, disenfranchised, lost, and bring them back to the church, because that is where they belong.
Yes, and one more thing before we wrap things up. I sent it to you earlier, but I was visiting a monastery Thursday, and I remember driving 2 miles out deep in Georgia woods, nothing but trees. I lose signal. I'm like, all right, I'm going down there, and I pull up, and it's a giant, beautiful garden with a small little building where they're selling fudge and coffee, stuff that the monks make. I thought, that's nice. I look left, and then there's a statue of Holy Mother Mary. And I'm thinking to myself, where's the Abbey? And then there's a sign that says, Abbey, this way, prayer walk, and it's 3 miles. Whoa. So I took my rosary off, and then I started praying the rosary while walking deeper and deeper into the forest. And it's truly a very unique experience where you're just alone by yourself in your head, praying and thinking. And then right at the end of it, I finally hear the chanting and I hear the bell, and here lays before me the most beautiful cathedral, if you will, I've ever seen. And I'm like, I did not even know this exists in the state. And just trees all around it, is nature combined with it. And I go in these big sweeping oak doors, and all I see is a glass pane of Mother Mary and a light coming through, and then the monks like silently saying their prayers and then singing their hymns. And truly, for anyone, even if you weren't Christian, I would recommend visiting a monastery, or feeling, you truly feel the passion of Christ there and the power of the church. And like you said earlier, that's the most, I see, ascended role of masculinity, if you will, is to give oneself to, you know, a higher purpose.
Yeah. And to others. So,
But
I appreciated you sending me that. And like I said in return, I've never been to a monastery because we're not spoiled for choice here, thanks to Henry VIII, destroying all of them. But I'm very grateful that the church I go to every week is very traditional in the architecture. It was built just after it became legal again to be Catholic in this country, which was like, I think, the mid 1800s. It always has amazing choirs. There's always lots of incense. It's when someone thinks of Catholicism, that is what they think of. And to be there every week and to sort of see the examples being led by the fathers with their families, and just like, I don't think you can get a more masculine image than a man with his family in church, like leading his family. It's something truly incredible to behold, and it's something I can't wait to do.
yes, I'm looking forward to that. I've been currently on a path right now where I'm trying to see God's purpose for me, if I want to give myself and my service to the church, or if I do want to have a family down the road. And something I've currently been struggling with, but I've been saying this the whole time, you know, I trust in the Lord. I know He'll guide my hand and He'll make the correct decision for me, because He lays the paths for you. It's just me making a decision, which one is it, if you will. But definitely that. It's kind of funny though, because the brotherhood that ran that monastery, the monks, they fall under, I believe, the Dominican friar, where they were just had these long ropes. They can't even see the bottom of their feet, and then they walk with their heads slightly tilted down and their hands in prayer. And then you just see them walk around very softly, where it gives the illusion they're not even walking, like they're almost levitating around the ground. And it's them just like mumbling hymns and prayers and Aves Marias. And then I just thought that was like phenomenal watching, because there's like, it's almost like an entire different world. Like, you just a detox, like no electronics, no interruptions, no people telling you these things, but truly you felt like you're at home.
Yeah.
But
There's it's a bit of a trend at the minute for particularly like business types that post on LinkedIn to go to silent retreats. A lot of those will be Benedictine Catholic monasteries. They have a vow to be silent nearly all the time. I just find it quite funny how lots of people will go there and be like, wow, this is so amazing, this brings me so much inner peace. All right, back to the office on Monday. Let's not look into what these people believe at all and why it influences them to be so at peace. And but thankfully, most people who go there and are guided by, like, say, if you took a friend there and are able to demonstrate the true beauty of it and what it's all for, it will be a life-changing experience for anyone, that's for sure.
agreed. Well, guys, you heard it all here. This has been Rec Room Radio, and thank you again for our guest, Ceadda, for being here. Is there any closing comments you want to leave out for the audience at all?
I would like to say so, but I think we've covered a whole lot. I think anyone who might be curious as to what I believe now, why should, I hope, have the motivation and us to go forward and keep learning. That's it.
Yes, thank you again for being here. It's been a true pleasure and an honor.
Yeah, thank you very much. I always love getting a chance to just talk about this sort of stuff. It's great when someone actually wants to listen.
Yes, it's the best. We're a rare breed, I'll tell you that. But this has been Rec Room Radio, signing out. Thank you.